One, I'm not sure if you just got lost from the coffee break and you ended up in this room by accident, but we'll try to enjoy the next half an hour. For those who don't know me, I'm Vittorio. I've been doing MySQL pre-sales for the last eight or so years, so I've seen quite a lot of funny things, and today I want to talk to you about one of those funny things, which, by surprise, sometimes can take quite an effort until it's not done, because when it's done, we discover that it might take an effort, but not as much as we imagined, and that is migrating from asynchronous replication to InnoDB Cluster. And it says in real life, almost. In real life, because this is an example, what I'll show you, which includes a demo. It's an example that you can take, actually, to a real-life production scenario with very low risk. Why almost? Because of two reasons. Because the data set which I was using, for obvious reason, was not a production data set, so was not a terabyte or so of data. And the second reason why almost, it's because the demonstration which I'll show was done by myself, but it's recorded. So this is the agenda for today. We'll remind ourselves replication and InnoDB cluster, and then we'll see some of the caveats which sometimes can be a roadblocker, and then we'll see the demo. So, I suppose you all remember asynchronous replication, binary log shipping, applying the relay log, done, easy, simple, asynchronous. About 2017, version 5.7.17, we have introduced the InnoDB cluster. The majority of the people remained almost unaware of that until version 8.0, which is for bad and for good. For good because in 8.0 InnoDB cluster gained further maturity, so it was less error prone than in the past, so people start to use it. So what do we have? We have MySQL shell, group replication, MySQL router. I suppose we all know about this. And we have to move about, today's goal is moving from asynchronous replication to InnoDB cluster. So essentially moving from this to this. Before MySQL 8.4, there was a way to do it. Currently, there is a slightly different way to do it. So, before MySQL 8.4, to go from this to this, the replica could have became your primary. Then you could have added the first secondary as a spare machine, and then the source could have become your last secondary server. As per MySQL 8.4, the rules changed because no manual replication channels are allowed by the admin API, so unfortunately we'll have to break this replication channel. But a bit before. Keep in mind, if you want to do that on 8.0, you can keep the replication channel active until the very last moment, and this guy here can have a dual role. Now, I'll go quick through the next slides because a lot of this will be shown in the demo. Just probably the demo won't be available as the PDF slides will be published, so I have put some instructions. Group replication prerequisite, usual stuff. So every table needs to be in InnoDB. You will need an odd number of server. Primary key on every table, binary log active in row mode, GTIDs turned on, which is the starting point of the demo, so GTIDs are on, which was a best practice also for asynchronous replication. And then there is the full list for your own benefit. Now, if you need the version upgrade, you can, so one of the common roadblocker, you're sitting on old MySQL, you can use the MySQL shell upgrade checker to see what you need to change before upgrading. So, are your instances ready for InnoDB? You can check the instance configuration to check what else needs to be changed before moving to InnoDB Cluster. We'll see this live. Still, MyISAM tables. Well, look for what the MyISAM tables are. Upgrade them to InnoDB. Sometimes it can take quite an effort and time, but nevertheless needs to be done. Also because, as we all probably know here, MyISAM doesn't have fail-safe mechanisms and so on. So remember the good old days of table corruption. Not using GTID, this is a bit worse. You need to use them. There is a way which you can find here to add them with the downtime. And then there is the way without downtime, which is much longer. It can take up to several days because all the transaction needs to align, and the transaction without GTIDs needs to disappear from the bin logs. So you can either purge the bin logs or wait for the expiration time of your bin logs. Missing primary keys, think about generated invisible primary keys. It's very handy, very useful. I personally have a customer in Spain which introduced generated invisible primary keys without telling anything to the application team, and the application didn't break, so it didn't stop working. So he took that at its own risk, but maybe do not do that. Make your application team aware. Just know that there are people who have just done it and it worked. Now, those are the instructions. I'll skip through this because we'll see this live. So we prepare the instances, then we deploy the cluster, and then we deploy MySQL router. I'm going quickly through this because this is a bunch of resources for your benefit to consult later on. And now demo. So the demo setup has, we'll see what I have. All right. So, I'm not sure if this is visible. Yeah, turn off the light. Oh. So the light is connected to the projector. Yay! All right, so what do I have here? I'll start it in a while. So the good of the video demo is that I can stop and comment. I have the demo server. Where I have the script continuously running, which is basically inserting progressive numbers. And then I do have MySQL 1 and 2, where there is replication active. And I have a third machine, which is just empty. So, what do I do here? We have the application running. As you can see, the numbers are scrolling. And I just start off MySQL shell. And I switch to JavaScript mode, and I will configure this instance, or check for the configuration first of all. I do connect to the local instance. I'm using a root user. I guess I was just too lazy to create any other user. And I provide password. I don't want to save the password. And here, as you can see, I do have some requirements which will be added. Mainly it's about adding GTIDs and changing a few more variables. Adding GTIDs to an instance where it's not activated will require a restart, but the instance is empty, so we don't care. Essentially is that. So the instance, the changes will be applied at configuration time, and the instance will be restarted. So now, configuring the instance, again with the connection string. And again, I need to provide the password. I don't want to say the password once again. And I confirm the changes is changing. What's going on?
I think it's your foot on the cable.
Okay, very nice. So the server has restarted now. All the parameters to go on as part of group replication have been applied. And I will connect actually to the instance in SQL mode. And I'll check once again if now the instance is ready. So don't worry, I'll be doing all of these just once. So now the status is okay, and this is the message we do want to see. And now I can go to some more important instances. I will actually close the instance number 3 because I don't need it active anymore. I can just remote into it. And let's see how my replication is doing. So this is the replica of my replication setup. And I'll just connect to it locally. I don't like saving passwords like at all. Show replica status. Better with /g if I have to show something like that. And everything looks okay. The information is replicating. Show databases. TP test is that schema created by this script over here. Now I'm connecting to the first MySQL, so to the source. And this application is writing directly into the source. I don't like to replicate, I like to save password. Show databases. Everything seems fairly legit. So I do have my GTID set. And everything is running quite okay, just another cross check to be sure. And here is here is when I always forget the syntax. And in fact I do. I never remember any syntax. Again. So I went, as always in my life, for a shortcut. Because in reality, I do need only to check the GTID sets. So, since I never remembered the syntax, what could I do? Show not at all, not even that. And I went for the shortcut, as I said.
What's the syntax, by the way? I always forget.
Me too. So this was another attempt, but then I got fed up with trying to remember, and this is what I needed to compare. Roughly on the same number, so they are aligned. So now that we know that the replica is aligned and I'm not faking the demo, we can go on. And I can very much check for the configuration on the second server. Why on the second and not the first? There is no order for that. Check the configuration. We can do whatever. Let's see if the configuration is good to go. And it's okay. So since the replication was already using the GTIDs, the default of all the other variables since 8.4 is good to accept group replication, because before in 8.0 it was changing also other variables, but then in 8.4 the default of certain variables has changed to be more friendly towards group replication. Here as well on the primary, on the replication source, it's okay. So now we can start with the fun stuff. And I need to stop the replication, so stop replica, and reset replica all. So reset replica all would just reset the data of every replication channel. Luckily will not kill the binary logs, so we can do incremental recovery afterwards, which for a huge dataset is suggested because the clone can be either slow if you're cloning a lot of data, or can negatively affect networks. So now I can pretty much focus on configuring the instance. Now that the replication has been stopped, I had some network lagging this time because the SSH was responding quite slow. So I basically did not edit this video to have also the small inconvenience of a real demo. So I am actually creating a cluster admin user to have all the minimum set of privileges to manage InnoDB Cluster, and I am basically done. I am coming back to the configure instance because in the previous run I have forgot to create a cluster admin, and I do want a cluster admin user. I do not want to administer the cluster with root user, even though I could, but I'm lazy, but not that lazy to overlook something like that. So I'm entering the password for the new account, which by the way is the same I was using for root because I have very bad memory. Just don't tell anyone. And here we go. I create the cluster admin for the third MySQL as well, because you remember when I configured the third instance, I didn't add. I basically forgot. I'm doing it now remotely. No big issue about that. So, we are ready to go. We're ready to start creating the cluster. And I can connect to the instance, essentially, with the cluster admin, with the IC admin user, not with the root user. And DBA cluster. So I initialize a cluster variable. I can do that also later. And I am creating a cluster. I don't like the name, cluster 1. So why did I change the name? Because if in the future I want to add the disaster recovery with the cluster set, I already have a reasonable name in place. So the cluster is created. Now I can show the cluster status. And I have a cluster with one node, which by itself is no use, or nearly to no use. And I can start adding the other nodes. So, cluster.add instance user at host, and it's not asking for a recovery method because it found suitable GTID subset, so it's recovering automatically using GTIDs. So incremental. And now I have a cluster of 2 nodes, which is online, and the second node is read-only. And now I will add the third node, as we can imagine. And the third node will automatically choose the clone method because it didn't find any GTIDs. If the dataset is big enough to want to avoid the clone method, we can obviously restore it back up on the empty nodes beforehand. And now I do have a cluster of 3 nodes. Yeah, so what's next? So the application keeps running. I do have 3 nodes on the cluster, single primary. Now I guess we will have to add the router. So, time to add the router to our setup. And in the meanwhile, I went for coffee because you can see the application indexes which kept running, and I am bootstrapping MySQL router on a temporary directory to be able to customize the config file. And it automatically creates the configuration with a read-write configuration, a read-only configuration, and an automatic read-write split configuration. So I am starting the MySQL router process. And let's see if it works. So it has to connect. on one of the exposed router ports. I guess I'll try 6450. Indeed. I'll use password. And I am on the MySQL, one of the 3 MySQL servers. So select host. Let's see on which server I ended up. Host name, yes. That was, I never remember variables, syntax. Too bad of me. We are on one of the secondary servers. So by default, port 6450 takes us on a read-only server. In reality, if we need to write, it will take that particular query to the read-write one. And I guess it is time to switch the application, or not yet. Create database. I want to create a database to make a writing test out of MySQL shell. It worked, so it took the write query actually to the primary node. So it separates the load. And again, whenever it needs to read something, it takes me to the secondaries. So we can switch the application. I've killed the script. I'll just, oh, so now you know my root password. You still don't know the host name. So I've changed the host and the port. And I'm restarting the application. It's resuming where it left from. So what can I do now? I guess I can do a failover test. So let's do a failover test last minute just for fun. Let's restart the MySQL. It's enough as a failover test. And the application will give an error and then will reconnect. So essentially, as we expect, it works. So while the service is restarting, I have already connected somewhere else. So now I can visualize the status of my InnoDB cluster, and I'll see that everything is back in place, and then I will switch. I'll switch back. So cluster dba.get cluster and the cluster status. So basically this is the proof the failover actually happened. No one is amazed here. So then we can do all sorts of things and revert the primary, manually assigning the server we prefer. And just to wrap it up, this was a simple exercise. Maybe if you are talking to people which are afraid to switch from replication to InnoDB cluster, just perhaps you might help spread the word out that it's not a dangerous thing to do. It brings a whole lot of benefits which we do know about. And if you have any questions about this, you're welcome. Otherwise, I will be waiting for you. Tomorrow I'll be having another presentation about why REST APIs in MySQL are good to use and why essentially they can be very good help for our middleware. So, thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure.